Hey people, it's Hilary. That's that beautiful head wrap that you were wearing the other day at dinner. I love it. I thank you so much for agreeing to be my co-host today to talk a little bit about episode 2 with Dr. Chandra Degia, who I affectionately call Dr. Chan. Um, it's interesting because as I was watching back the episodes, the first thing I realized was that I recorded the introduction in New Orleans when we were there on what I call my retreat, because you're retreating, but like I joined you for a few days. And I was like, oh, look at this. It's like perfect that Hilary's a person. Did you catch that when you were watching?
I did.
Yeah, I was like, oh, look at this, New Orleans. So that was my first thing that I noticed. And, I wanted to share a little bit about why I wanted to talk to Dr. Chan so much. She's one of those friends I've had for a long time, but she's almost like this mentor friend where sometimes you're just sitting there listening to her talk, and she has a couple radio programs, and one I used to listen to a lot called Growing Consciousness. And some of the ideas that she introduced were things that even at the time when she was introducing them, I didn't feel like totally like I fully get this, but I was open to it, if that makes sense. And so, she felt like the perfect person to talk to about some of the stuff that we got into. And as you can see through the conversation, we covered a lot of ground. Going from like, how do you find joy in something really hard? So like the example of the cancer patient that she opened with, to me talking about like how I had to even come to terms with some of that stuff, like doing all this work in communities around sexual assault and violence. Like, how does that become something that doesn't define us, but it's an experience we've had, so the difference between that. And then the piece that I really personally I got into was like self-awareness, because I think so many of us walk around, feeling self-aware, but really like not being tuned into ourselves in that way that she kind of got into. And when she did that, I was like, oh, it was funny because there was a longer clip and then there was a shorter clip. And I did that on purpose because I felt like someone might get lost in the longer clip, but that shorter clip kind of like hit home. So I don't know. I kind of was like really nerded out on the self-awareness piece. I was like, oh, I love this. And then the idea of turning to our thoughts then, like, and how our thoughts kind of really inform what happens in our world. And so I gave that example of my epilepsy and rewriting that poem. And really, that was game changing for me. And so I wanted to introduce it in like a real personal story. And then I think the lessons piece was also a beautiful way to end the series, just thinking about, well, after all of this, we get to learn some beautiful things. So, that's kind of like my overview of all the things we talked about. So I'm curious about what jumped out for you, what you really enjoyed, if you learned something,
Mm-hmm. I took notes.
Ah.
Of course. So the three things, probably more than three things. The first thing that really deeply resonated with me is the thing that she brought up about the power of experimentation, how she was reading Shakti Gawain's creative visualizations. And that's the thing about teachers, like, a teacher is someone you can trust when they're like, test the theory, right? Like, try it out in your life and see what results you get. Don't take my word for it. Don't just, continue our societal pattern of like seeking the protection of authority by just buying into what, people with perceived power tell you to believe, but really test it out and find what resonates, find, and then test it and figure out what works for you right now, which may not be the thing that works for you 5 years from now or 10 years from now, but what works right now to help you feel better, to help you be more of the person that you want to be in your present life, like with your present situation. So I loved, like she was talking about herself, like not wanting to go to school, and which we can totally understand, you know, why any child, not to mention a Black person, not to mention a Black woman, would feel like, oh, this is not a safe or welcoming or like, you know, constructive place for me to be in. But then even those situations that are really difficult, when we get a sense of our true power, and then we experiment with that in other areas, then, and now she's an academic, right? Like I love that, right? Like she found the power of how she thinks about things, and then was able to really transform her relationship to an institution and be like, oh, but I can operate within this space and use what's useful to me to do what I'm committed to doing in the world. So I really, really love that.
Yes. And you know what's so funny about that? I was leading some focus groups recently with students and came across this piece that Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote. I think it was in his book, Between the World and Me, but where he talked about how much school was just basically, you know, he was so disconnected from school and it felt like a waste of his time. And he's also an academic and someone that people, you know, really just take in every word that he shares. And I found that so like fascinating and powerful, because you tend to take the thing that, you know, was really like felt harmful to you, or the pressure of that, and you made it something beautiful. And I feel like that's what Dr. Chan has done, seriously, is that those experiences she shared, I was like deep into understanding what that must have felt like for her. And like you said, seeing where she is now, I'm like, whoa, you know, that is the power of deciding something different for yourself. You know, that is the power of like leaning in and breathing into something else. That could have been like, oh, I just left it and never went back. It could have been that, you know, story.
Right, right. And it's also the power of those situations, like situations that aren't easy, give us an opportunity to really experience our creative power. Like if she hadn't had such a hard time in school, would she be the powerful teacher that she is today? You know, like if school had been easy and she had been easy for her, and like that had just like been smooth sailing, would she have developed into such a powerful teacher?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's like the picnic thing. I loved her picnic example. It's like, well, it's raining, so that could be an opportunity for like it could be an opportunity, which we know when we've come through those like hard situations.
Well, you know what I loved about the picnic, and she, you know, she gave a couple of those, like the picnic and the flat tire and the, you know, the kind of like the things that really happen that we like really make a choice. And what I loved about that is I have seen myself in some moments make the choice where it's like, this is horrible.
Yeah.
This is just horrible. This is just not gonna, you know, whatever. It's just the worst thing. And when she gave that example, when I rewatched, and I was like, you know what? This right here is the gem in the crown of this conversation, because so many of us have that opportunity every day to choose what we're gonna think or experience in a situation.
Yeah.
Are we gonna make it horrible? Are we gonna make it the worst thing? Are we gonna make it something that's like, you know what? Let's move inside. Let's do something else with this. Like, let's still love this moment. Shift, but still enjoy ourselves because we're here, you know? And yeah, I think every day we have that opportunity, probably multiple times.
Definitely.
I am working on, you know, choosing the high, I guess the high road or whatever, the positive, the beautiful more often. But I just saw myself. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, it could be a good thing. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, for me, that was another really good example. And, you know, you and I, we met through East Bay Meditation Center. Um, the connection through Sistah, so, you know, like that whole thing wove us together. But, you know, I also really appreciated her talk about the monkey mind and self-awareness. And, you know, as she mentioned the Buddhist, I thought about EBMC. And I thought about, for example, how much I've heard a lot of the women that we circle with, but, you know, people in general beat themselves up for being distracted during meditation, like not feeling like that they're doing it right. And it was interesting to me listening to her play out, well, you know, how do I kind of stay here and present? And, you know, because that's something that so many of us are grappling with. I mean, the reason why that hit me really hard is that, first of all, we spend a lot of time saying, I'm not doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
But second of all, you know, we are, a lot of us, working through how do we become more self-aware? How do we become more present? And the gift that I found is meditation and getting into practice of getting close to my breath and really getting in tune, or like really sitting with a guided meditation that just like I focus on the words or what's happening in that moment in a way that then I think paves a way for greater self-awareness. I mean, I have just noticed in my life over the last, I don't know, 2-3 years, a shift in just noticing me, like being the watcher of my thoughts, and really pulling some stuff back, like really going, I don't think that's what I want to be focused on, or, you know. And I do think self-awareness is a huge, huge, huge shift one can make in their life that will shift and change and open up so many things. What are your thoughts on self-awareness and what, you know, Dr. Chan shared?
Mm-hmm.
I'm drinking tea. I'm drinking some tea. I love this little cup. It says "Believe in yourself." I don't know if you can see it, but
Awesome. I love inspirational messages on all things.
yeah.
Yeah, I really loved her conversation on self-awareness and like the distinction between, so I think of it, I don't think of it so much as monkey mind. I know that's like common, um, it's like it's a common parlance around that. I find though that folks go to a lot of judgment around it. It's like, okay, so that's what I shouldn't be doing. And then when they're doing it, they're focused on what they shouldn't be doing and kind of making themselves wrong for it. So I just think of it in terms of the distinction between like my patterned habitual thinking and my guidance. And like she talked about that inner voice, like the inner, you know, like I can't remember her exact language, but it was something about like that inner voice, like the still voice, the still silent voice, or the quiet voice, or the voice of God, or like whatever. But like that there's my pattern thinking that might be keeping me stuck in some things that I don't want. And then there's my guidance. And that even just noticing that there's different threads to that, like even noticing, like she said, that if you don't even know that there's this inner, you know, like all of these streams of thought going on, then you're not self-aware. And I see it as like aware of my thoughts, my feelings, and my experience. And that my thoughts and my feelings give me the like they can tell, like I can see that my thoughts and my feelings match my experience. And then it's like, again, being a scientist, oh, well, if I alter my thoughts, that alters my feelings, and then that alters my experience, like being like scientific about it. And observation is, you know, one of the primary tenets of the scientific method. Like you have a theory, you set up an experiment, and you observe how things play out. And so being able to observe, we're very good at observing what seems like external reality because there's so many things to take our attention, and bringing that, like through meditation, bringing that observation inside, we get connected to like our real power.
Mhm. Perfect. I love this. Thank you so much, Hilary, for joining me today to recap our conversation, my conversation with Dr. Chan.
My
I feel
pleasure.
like you and I have had such a great conversation. I might like make this two-parter. All right. Balls of gratitude, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.